don't hold yourself to the standard of my writing. Come on. No, that's
Yeah.
that was a little spider baby there for you. Start throwing your weight around, asking people, "Don't you know who I am?" That always works so well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Don't you know who this hat is? Come on.
What are the challenges associated with characterization of other already developed characters like the Scooby Gang?
It's tricky because a story is a character changing, and yet you have to not change these characters or the people who own them will go nuts. They have to be the exact same. So then you resort to the illusion of changing the characters. One that I remembered that I liked a lot, the Elf King, which is a German myth that I plugged Shaggy and Scooby into. They became the characters basically of the poem, which it's this famous German poem. And so, of course, there's a chase scene. It took them through the library where they learned the Elf King's weakness. Of course, hijinks ensue. Uh, they win. Shaggy and Scooby excuse themselves from the rest of the gang, and the rest of the gang says, "Oh, you're off to the kitchen, are you?" And they said, "No, we're actually going to the library because we want to learn more how to beat the monsters or something like that." And it was sort of a yuck yuck kind of moment, but it was a nice little twist because everyone, of course, expects them to eat or whatever, including their own friends, the other characters. But it was a more serious version of a womp womp kind of moment where no, no, you're wrong. But I didn't permanently change those characters. You could never mention that again, and it's never been mentioned again, and no one would miss it or notice it, or as opposed to Shaggy lost his right arm battling the Elf King or something like that, and now he's going to bravely rehab and try to go back to mystery solving. Can't do those kinds of changes, but the smaller ones like that. Other things I did, like subplot stuff, I developed a kind of quasi romance between Velma, of all people, and Shaggy uh, when I was the main writer on that book early on, and their friendship just strengthened. It wasn't necessarily romantic. I don't think any of those kids. I know the joke is always since Fred and Velma, or excuse me, Fred and Daphne never seem to actually encounter monsters. That they're in some janitor's closet making out or something like that. But I always wrote those characters like Adonis and Shakespearean poem. All Adonis wants to do is hunt. All these kids want to do is solve mysteries. They're not interested in romance or anything like that. But anyway, little digression there. That first part was a pretty good answer to your question. Thank you.
All right, and I have some more like writing questions. So, sort
Sure.
of, what does your creative or working process generally look like?
There is no general um, paradigm in that, like a comic book project. Um, I would you come up. Well, I'll use Scooby as an example. The editor would inform her writers, okay, we're going to accept springboards, which is like a 2 paragraph summary of the story. You include the monster, you include the mystery, the suspects, and the solution, and then send it in. And then the editor either approves it or doesn't. And if the editor approves it, then it goes over to Cartoon Network and they either approve it or they don't. In that instance, you're just thinking in terms of, okay, what hasn't been done before? What can I use? What am I trying to say? I've done. There was one I did the Great Barrier Reef because I always thought the basic premise is there's always the land holds some kind of secret and the bad guy knows about it but nobody else does. It's actually oil rich or there's uranium here or something valuable. And I took that paradigm and I applied it to the Great Barrier Reef, which is having a lot of trouble. And so the bad guy was actually a well-meaning, I guess, bad guy, but still trying to preserve the Great Barrier Reef and scaring people away from it just because tourists are killing it, that kind of thing. So I've had editors at DC and other places come to me and say, okay, I want you to include this, this, and this. I've had a little over 10 years ago, DC came to me and said, we're looking for stories for an anthology called Batman Family. And I said, oh, okay. And I sent them a springboard of a story that I'd written featuring the villain, the Riddler, or I proposed the Riddler, and where the Riddler, inspired by an episode of Jeopardy, which of course we changed the name to protect our asses from lawsuits, he changed it rather than leaving riddles to clue in Batman to his upcoming crimes. He leaves the solutions to the riddles, and it throws everything off and it screws everything up. So they liked that idea, but they said the only spot they had, telling this out of order, is for Batman Family. And I said, well, okay, what's wrong with Batman Family? And they said, well, there's one character who's not allowed to be in Batman Family. It's Batman. I said, oh, okay. So I used a character named the Question versus the Riddler, who was an openly lesbian character at that time. I think they retconned her about 2,000 times. Renee Montoya was her name. And I actually was kind of depressed when they turned her into a superhero. She'd been a very interesting member of the Gotham City police force. And I thought, does everyone have to end up wearing a costume? Well, that wasn't my call, but that was a combination of them coming to me and me coming to them. Sometimes I find inspiration in the news. Sometimes I'm trying to think of what I'm working on currently. Obviously, I do a lot of nonfiction writing, and that's just reporting and basically. And so I always refer to it as non-fiction writing, which makes me more comfortable for some reason. And it's all ultimately storytelling. But I'm working on a project covering, what is it? It's Avenues of Youth, which is housing unhoused teenagers, many of whom are queer, and very generous donation of blankets, sheets, and towels, things most of us kind of take for granted. And this was presented to me. Do you want to write this article? Yes, I do. So I accepted that. I've done short stories. I've done poems. I'm struggling with a short story where a cute little dog is being chased. His owner, who's a boy, is trying to protect him, and the people doing the chasing, we eventually learn, are the good guys, and the dog is actually a bad guy. But our instincts are always do the difference. So there's no real pattern to it, which is, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and it's if there were a pattern to be found, I would have found it. And it's a little exasperating when this is how you make money. And I've learned, as far as creativity and all that goes, don't overthink it. Don't just accept that it's there. There's a writer I've come to admire a lot in the last few years named Cormac McCarthy. He was a favorite of Oprah Winfrey's, and well, his stuff is just insanely violent. But he said before he writes, he's died recently, but before he writes, he just sits down and he says to the creative forces out there, I'm listening. And I thought, what, that's a really good attitude to have, just because you feel more like you're receiving more than producing.
Yeah, I really like that line of thinking. It kind of takes the pressure off a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. If you think about it too much, if you try to quantify it or qualify it, it's like, where is this company? How is this happening? How can I make it more formalized? How can I summon it instantly? You'll chase it away every time. So you just it's just the grumpiest house cat in the world. You wait for it to come to you, and you're grateful when it does.
Oh, I feel that.
You leave them
I
with end on the
affectionately
highest.
refer to myself as a story dragon because I will hoard any type of story that resonates with me, whether that's I have a box of DVDs that are movies and shows, I have two boxes of books, stuff like that. And drag is just another story, I guess, or not just another, because stories are not just stories to me. They're so much. Um,
I take your meaning that most people not involved in the same way that you and I are wouldn't even think of them as stories in the first place. But then you say, "Oh yeah, that's another story." I get it, and of course you're right. Although you were talking about drag, but it's all drag, as David Johansen wisely put it. I'll just emphasize again, as a closer, that young writers, please remember, if you want to be a professional writer, you got to be professional first. Those two words are in the order they're in for a reason. You're not a writing professional; you're a professional writer, and you can be as talented and as skilled as you want. But if you're a screwball, if you're a flake, if editors and publishers can't depend on you, you'll, you'll never work. Maybe once and then not again. Your reputation is really important. You would think people aren't all that connected. They are, or they can be, and you should assume they are. And make yourself away from the writing that you can be proud of.